The dogfight is pure conflict, two men dueling on the open plain of the sky. In its terrifying purity of purpose, it is perhaps the essence of war.
A dogfight it's exciting. It was like a joust, really. Here's an aircraft that's piloted by a thinking person. If he's good, you better be better.
It's just like being in a knife fight in a dirt floor bar. If you want to fix a fellow, the best way to do it is get behind him and stick him in the back. Well, it's the same thing in an air fight. If you want to kill that guy, the best thing to do is get around behind him where he can't see you and shoot him.
World War II had a brutal way of weeding out the average, so the fighter pilot had to be good. It didn't hurt to be lucky either, but there was no compensating for a lack of courage. He had to want to be there.
I might say motivation has an awful lot to do with it. I think that's, you know, something you can't measure. It's inside you. Guys that would close on the enemy, you know, a killer instinct. I think you had to have that, too.
To be a good fighter pilot, he's got to quick on the draw, in the sense of knowing the situation, seeing it, and reacting.
To the people at home, they were as pure a hero as the war had to offer. The air war over Europe required the skills of the fighter aces, pilots who had 5 or more kills to their name. The fighter aces of the 357th Fighter Group were the sort America needed in such dangerous times. Men of skill and courage who chose to serve. Men who saw not just duty, but adventure. Thomas Hayes, Clarence Anderson, William O'Brien, Richard Peterson. World War II found them more boys than men, raw, untrained. But when they learned to fly, it was something for which they had been practicing in one way or another all their lives.
Our parents would take us, like if we were visiting some city, you know, like San Francisco or Oakland or something, they'd take us and dump us off at the airport on Sunday morning and then come pick us up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we would just spend the whole day looking at airplanes. And even then, I can remember I wanted to be a fighter pilot at that time, not even knowing what it was all about.
The war was an opportunity, a chance to learn how to fly, to hone and perfect their skills.
I canceled out of school. I went down to enlist in the Air Force. Gee, filled out all the blanks, happy to see you, and all kinds of enthusiasm from the recruiting office. After I signed all the pieces of paper and so on, he says, all right, now take this home to your parents for signature, because I wasn't old enough. I was not 21, I was 18. Boy, I had to talk like a senator for about 3 days to talk them into signing that neither one would sign the paper, because as far as they were concerned, it was a death warrant for them to sign a paper for me to enlist in the Air Force.
Friendships grew quickly in the common ground of training. On the train to California, Peterson met a young man named Jim Jago, a military academy graduate and already something of an old military hand.
So Jago and I were the ones who were usually the renegades, and if I ended up with the merits, then Jago would also walk with me, whether he had them or not, so we would be keeping each other company.
They trained on the P-39.
An interesting thing is the guy that checked me out in the first P-39 was standing there with a bandage all over his head, boy, and he still had some blue marks around through here. And his classical instructions were, watch out for that son of a gun, OB, because it'll kill you.
Not all who entered flying school would be pilots. There were tests, checks, counter-checks, all designed to ensure that only the best became fighter pilots. A third of the recruits were weeded out before basic fighter training even began. Anderson, O'Brien, and Peterson all made the grade. So did Jim Jago.
When it came time to graduate, which was March 10th, 1943, boy, that was a thrill, because we now had our shiny gold bars and our silver wings, and we were just in hog heaven. That was just great. Because, you see, nobody could touch us. We knew all there was to know about this game because now we had our wings.
Underneath the pleasure and the pride, however, were dark hints of danger they had yet to face.
Jim Jago. He was at Oakland and doing aerobatics and the usual things that we always had done together. And in pulling back to pull it out of the dive, it mushed into the hills and he was killed. And that was quite a shock. It was because he was a real close friend. And so it began to kind of bring home more closely again the frailties of flying these kind of aircraft, that they were high-powered aircraft, and they could jump up and bite you.
The members of the 357th would first meet in Tonopah, Nevada, an Army Air Force training field for fighter pilots. Anderson and O'Brien came in as flight leaders, Peterson as a pilot. Another training accident, the death of Squadron Commander Varian White, helped to fuse the newly formed 357th into a fighting unit. White's replacement, a fighter pilot fresh from the Pacific Theater, Thomas Hayes.
General Hayes, we loved him. He was kind of my ideal in a way. He came to our unit as a more experienced pilot than we were. You know, he came in as a squadron commander. And so he'd been in the South Pacific and he'd been in combat and he'd shot down Japanese. You know, to me that was, he was like God.
Well, I think the greatest thing I could see when I arrived at Tonopah was, geez, the gung-ho spirit there. And what a success this 357th actually enjoyed. You got an outfit like that, it's a case of holding them back. It's not a case of pushing them.
Tonopah afforded us an opportunity to fly from the crack of dawn, even up through dark. We night flying and everything like that, so we piled up a bunch of time. A fighter group or a fighter organization is actually only about as good as its experience level. There's nothing within 75 miles in any direction that can be hurt by human hand. I mean, nothing. So that's why they called it the Tonopah Bombing and Gunnery Range. It was a beautiful, desolate desert. A rattlesnake would carry his lunch pail going across that country out through there.
We had a good outfit, and from what experience I had, I wanted to pass this on and get this unit ready. If I made any mistakes, in hindsight, I think it was because we were flying P-39s. All three squadron commanders, each squadron commander had experience in the Pacific. We were flying P-39s. The Germans had destroyed every P-39 as fast as it would fly in Europe. And I G2'd the thing. We were not going to Europe. We were going to go to the Pacific.
The destination of the 357th was not the Pacific. They would be crossing a different ocean. Still boys, untested in combat, their adversary would be the German Luftwaffe. Their next training ground, the skies of Europe.
And we were then sent to England on the Queen Elizabeth. There were 17,000 on the Queen Elizabeth. and I was in a honeymoon suite with 17 guys, bunk to bunk, and stacked up.
And we came in typical British weather. We got our indoctrination right off the bat. It was lousy and foggy and drizzly. We had a band playing for us, but this time it didn't do us any good because they were playing deep in the heart of Texas, and we sure as hell weren't going back.
They were assigned to a base named Leiston, near the town of Yoxford. The first night in their new home, welcome came from unexpected quarters.
We always listened to German radio because they played the best music, Glenn Miller and so on at the time, and all the good American music, because then they'd obviously get the Americans listening to them, and they could fill us with propaganda about how our girlfriends back home were having fun with the fellas who were staying at home, and yet we were over here fighting the war, and isn't that too bad, etc. Well, this particular time, the first night we were at Leiston, here comes this guy on the radio and said, "We want to welcome the Yoxford boys to Leiston, England, at Leiston Air Base." And my God, here's the German radio station talking about us, and we had arrived that night. I said, "Geez, we don't have a chance here. They know too much about us already."
The England of late 1943 was not the battered Ireland of 1940. The Battle of Britain had been won, and now England was the launching pad for the aerial assault on the Nazi war machine. The pastures and fields of the quiet English countryside were now dotted with hundreds of airstrips from which the 8th Air Force launched bombing strikes deep into the enemy heartland. Early in the war, the Allies possessed no fighter plane with sufficient range to escort the bombers into Germany. The German fighter planes, fast and deadly accurate, pounced on the bombers. Attrition reached unacceptable rates. Each crew member knew that his chances of returning from a mission were 1 in 3. The P-51 Mustang tipped the balance in favor of the 8th. Equipped with extra fuel tanks, able to reach speeds of 437 miles per hour, it flew farther, faster, higher, shepherding the bombers to their targets. The Mustang provided the shield for the sword arm of tactical bombing, and the Nazis soon gained an awesome respect for the plane and its pilots.
We started getting the P-51s, and I can say categorically that's probably the easiest airplane the United States Air Corps ever had to initially get in and fly. It required the least preparation. This was an honest airplane. I mean, it was great.
The first opportunity I had of engaging enemy aircraft was on the Bordeaux raid. We were being hit, and I just happened to notice, see this one, and I called him out to my wingman, and he was down below, coming across, and I rolled over on my back to lead him to get at him, either way, whichever way he went. And the wingman was with me. And I got so excited. I could see the crosses on the wings, and my God, I started firing before I should have. And I held the damn trigger down. And I was just throwing lead all over the place. And Harry rolled, pulled up, I'm rolling, firing. Lucky enough, I got some strikes on the cockpit. He kicked the canopy off, or got the canopy off, and kicked the stick, and he popped up. And as he went floating on by, he gave me a salute, and I'll never forget, it just raised the hackles on my neck. It was somewhat chivalrous to the guy. You know, here's a big, beautiful powder blue uniform and black gauntlets and black boots, and boy, he just saluted like he was standing at attention, floating on by, and pulled a ripcord, and it blossomed, and that was it. But I thought, guys, terrific.
Yeah, we were escorting bombers. I think it was over towards the target in Magdeburg, Germany. It was a very clear day, which is unusual. As we made this turn, you kind of instinctively look back. My wingman called 4 bogeys coming in on us at 5 o'clock. So I said, well, I might as well take the leader. And he turned out to be a fairly tough adversary. He made this hard turn, and which caused me to overshoot him, you know, go past him. So I could see, oh, this is not too good. So I had wide open throttle, so I just pulled the airplane straight up as steep as I could, and he reversed his turn. Of course, I was worried about my wingman now because he'd be behind me, and I told him to spin it off, get the heck out of there. But this guy went after me, and I pulled my airplane straight up, and I could look out the left side, and you know, he was below me. He couldn't quite get his nose up on me, and he stalled just before I did, and this put us in a reverse situation where he's going down, and now I'm chasing him. And he dove out, and as I closed, he made another one of these hard turns, and I said, oh, this is the same thing. And so instead of overshooting and pulling up again, I came back on the throttle, and then he was very, very good. He saw immediately what I was doing, and he added full power and turned around and pulled straight up, thinking that I'd be slow. Well, I came back in with the power and pulled up, and just as he was going almost vertical, I let a burst go right into his cockpit, and the thing started smoking and just slowly rolled over like that, and I came up right alongside of him. I could look right in the wheel well and see the grease and the rivets on the airplane. And he rolled over slowly, and from 30 to 32,000 feet, he just went right straight into the ground. No turns or anything like that, just leaving a big column of smoke. Boom, you know, it hit the ground, burst in flame. It was pretty dramatic.
I think the general consensus is if you could get 4 or 5 missions under your belt, you'd be in pretty good shape. As soon as you've done some of it a small amount of time, your confidence level goes up. And we came out all right. As a matter of fact, we trained ourselves from there on in. We have able instructors. They work for the German Air Force.
The day of a mission began in the dark of night, a rude and cold awakening.
Okay, fellas, roll out. We have a mission this morning. Breaks in half an hour.
Dear Mom and Dad, the door of our hut creaked open. I recognized Madeira's voice when he shook me and said, "Cut the mumbling, Pete. We've got another one today." I crawled out of the sack and asked a few incoherent questions. Something about where is it today? What time is it? The weather? As I staggered through the mess hall, holding my orange and fresh eggs as though they were gold, I could see the rest of the boys were still walking around in a sleepy day, so I wasn't alone. I soon found myself riding down to our squadron operations in the truck, shivering from a cold morning that hadn't located the sun yet. Someone yelled briefing over at headquarters in about 20 minutes, so I hurried a bit with the flying clothes, tended to some in-case details with intelligence, and went into our pilot's room. As we entered the briefing room at headquarters, the pilots of other squadrons were sitting around discussing the possibilities of our mission. Naturally, we all looked at the map at the front of the room. It carried the details of the mission.
The target for the day is Ankle. Specifically, you are to destroy the Arado factory.
A few questions quickly answered. The weather, radio procedure, and taxiing for takeoff directions are given.
We have a high-pressure system centered over northwest Europe, up here near Finland, extending southwestward down across the British Isles, causing an influx of south and southwesterly air going up.
The signal for synchronizing watches is given, and we're all set.
What do you think, Doc? They'll be shooting at us. Sometimes I don't think those scared.
Last-minute details are covered.
What do you expect, buddy?
We pick up our chutes, dinghy packs, oxygen masks, and life vests, pile into the truck, and we're off to our planes. Hiya, Kelly. How's she sound this morning? My crew chief, equally as fond of her as I am, gives out with a Pepsodent smile and says, "She'll go by her name, sir." Yeah, I mutter to myself, glancing up at the name printed on the nose. We were both on the wing by this time, putting the equipment into the cockpit and trying to fit me in with it. Anything in particular for me to watch, Kelly? She's starting to eat a little gas, but since you've got a short one today, there's nothing to worry about. Prop clear, I yell. Back comes clear. Switch on. Couple of primes and I push the starter. We all jockey into position for takeoff. Down goes the flag on time and off goes the leader. Yes, home never meant as much to us before as it does now. All my love, Pete.
Order was maintained in the sky by a tight hierarchy. There were 16 planes to a squadron, headed by the squadron leader. 3 squadrons made a group, commanded by a group leader.
His responsibility, of course, squadron commander, was not only his pilots, but the whole operation, the logistic, the crew chiefs, the armors, that it worked. The rest of the boys in the squadron were sort of, you know, he's going to take us through.
Tommy Hayes came in, and he was probably one of the best combat leaders we had. The particular thing about the fighter outfits is that a peculiarity is that the officers do the flying, they do the dying. The #1 man off the runway at the start of all this stuff is usually a senior officer, probably the group commander leading himself. When the squadrons go up, #1 man is usually the squadron commander or a highly experienced officer. Therefore, they generate leadership by demonstrating courage.
The fighter's mission was to protect the bombers. The bomber was a lumbering beast against the agile German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. The Germans preferred not to engage the fighter escort, concentrating their fire on the bombers.
Early on, we would look for what we called the Abbeville kids. They were all the yellow-nosed, and it was Goring's crack outfit. They had to have 20 victories to belong. Well, I tangled with one day, and he and I were both doing everything we knew. And it was right on the treetops, and ultimately we ended up in a tight circle. He was on one side and I was on the other. If he rolls out, I got him. If I roll out, he's got me. So it's who's going to outlast who, and I had plenty of gas. So one of the things we could do with the 51 was drop 10 degrees of flaps, which gave us more lift. In other words, allowed me to turn tighter. So now I'm using the aircraft to its ultimate capability. And now it's a matter of me getting that fun. He's trying to give me the most toughest shot I can ever get. So I have to get out here to get enough lead to get him. So I am shooting, literally looking over the root, through my wing root, down where I'm on top of him like this, firing this way. And the tracers go out, they go out straight, but it looks like they're going like this. And right into the top of the cockpit. And into the sniper rolled into the trees. But that was a full 20 minutes, half hour maybe.
So this one particular time, we were escorting bombers, and I remember just turning, kind of coming across the front. And, you know, we looked up, and here came about 8 109s, line abreast, just beautiful formation, just coming right straight into the bombers. And, you know, this is rapid. This is, the rate of closure is tremendous. You know, and here we are sitting up there at cruise speed. There wasn't a thing in the world we could do there but watch. And they went right through the bombers, shot down 2 of them, rolled over, split S, came back up and started to reform to make a second attack. Well, this one particular 109 that I got tangled up with, this guy was a little better than the average. And so there we are right out in front of these B-17s, and we're in a dogfight. We're coming around in a circle, and the B-17s are coming closer and closer and closer, and we're turning and turning and turning, trying to get after each other. And I had visions in my mind, you know, going right through these B-17s and then wondering who was who, you know, and B-17s would shoot at you, you know, if you got near them. P-51s looked like 109s, and lots of times they wouldn't know the difference anyway, so they shot at anything that came near. Anyway, he flew it very delicately, and I started to creep up on this 109, and the B-17s are coming right into my peripheral vision. And I don't know whether he was worried about the B-17s and decided to roll out, but he took it on down, and we ended up on the deck. And there was 4 of us and 4 of them, and we shot down 3 of them. I got one with a head-on pass, which is kind of exciting. And but again, it's just you know, if a guy turns and points a gun at you, you're going to point one at him and shoot first. And it worked, and I shot him down.
Combat in the air. This was what they'd come to do, and they developed their own way of doing it. As the dogfight could be, there was a code of honor, an unwritten understanding that the savagery of war need not make savages of its combatants.
I think the German pilot, highly regarded, or had a lot of respect, as well as the American pilots, for a person in a chute, because with our aircraft and guns and sights and so on, if you can see a frog, you can kill it. So that a person in a parachute is absolutely helpless. There is just, there's nothing challenging, and there's anything about it. It's just, he's helpless. So it was pretty much an unwritten rule that nobody shot anybody in a parachute.
Breaking the code earned a pilot the disdain he had shown to others.
We had lost several 17s due to flak, and the sky was fairly heavy with parachutes blossoming. Well, here was a 109 going from chute to chute, shooting up the fellows in the parachutes. I latched onto him, and I picked away at him so he knew I was there, and I was trying to get him to bail out, which eventually he did, and I shot him up in his chute. That's the only time that I felt it was justified.
Small factors in a pilot's ability polished his skills even more.
Many of the successful aces I knew had remarkable eyesight. In my case, I know I could test out to 20/15, which is better than normal. And I know Chuck Yeager's eyes were better than normal. And I do know that there's some kind of knack about seeing enemy airplanes. Chuck Yeager and myself, he was another flight leader in our squadron. We could see airplanes that nobody else could see. And, you know, even after we describe where they are, what they're doing, you know, they don't see them. And I've been on an attack run before people in the squadron or other people in the flight knew what we were really doing.
For all their skill and bravado, the pilots found themselves fastening onto odd superstitions.
I had one superstition I had, probably an ill-founded superstition. We had a couple of little dogs around that base. I don't know what they were, but they weren't mutts, I don't think. They might have been a pretty nice breed of dog. But those dogs took up with Chuck Yeager and a guy named Ed McKee. And Yeager got shot down, McKee got shot down, and I wasn't gonna pet those dogs. I want nothing to do with those damn dogs.
On some missions, when the bombers had completed their objective and were heading home, there was time for some freelance work.
Well, with the P-51, we had a lot of gas. We had a lot of fuel. So we would say, and now, independent of the group, we as a squadron would go out and search for the Germans.
Back at the base, the ground crews waited, watching the skies. When their planes came home, if they came home, it was time for relief as well as a little bragging.
Every time we got a kill, anybody shot anybody down, you'd come across the field and slow roll. I got one, see? Big deal.
But we took our losses, too. The 357th stood over 100% casualties. It took a year to get them, but we had a lot of casualties. My best friend was, lost him. I remember I stood on, down at the flight line until the sun was down. Still in the hopes that he would get in there. He didn't make it. But you accept it. The old crutch, it's going to happen to somebody else. It's not going to happen to me. This is a great piece of faith, you know. You're wrong, but this is what you believe.
But after it's over, and when you all come home, and it's a get-together then, it's up to the club, and you get your ration of a couple ounces of booze, and you get some beer at the club, and then you find out what really happened.
Between missions, it was time to relax, forget, make do with the evening's ration of boredom and loneliness. You could sit in front of the fireplace, listen to the familiar music, the comforting sounds of laughter and jumbled conversation, and with enough imagination, you could be anywhere, calm and safe. Anywhere but home, that is.
Well, occasionally we'd have a party, you know, at the base. Now, the prerequisites for this is that there'd be a group of young ladies who would be willing to come to your air base for a dance or a party at that time, or you may have a gal someplace. I don't know. I didn't myself personally. And but when they decided to have one of these parties, for some reason, the hospitality of England was manifest at that time. These young ladies would come out and make themselves available, and we would have a party at the officers' club. You may not have met this young lady before, but you'd meet her there. Usually we'd stock up pretty good on hooch and food at that time, and the British, believe it or not, had a tough time feeding their population, so these young ladies enjoyed the opportunity to have butter, white bread, roast beef, something like this, you don't see very much of, you know. And this was about what we did. There's a lot of drinking and a lot of horsing around and everything like that. And, let's be frank about it, sometimes it took 2 or 3 days to get the base cleaned back up again, get the gals out, but that's the facts of life.
These guys on the ground, I mean all of them. I'm speaking of the line chiefs, the crew chiefs, the farmers. A thankless job. I'm sure the thing that they'd like to see was their airplane get off on the mission. And up to an hour later, it didn't return, meaning it's going all the way. And perhaps the greatest thing then is to see their airplane come down and do a slow roll before landing. That's sort of the payoff.
You know, if you were successful, they were successful. And it used to kind of feed on it. The harder you worked, the harder they worked. And now in the summertime, we used to keep our airplanes camouflaged. We had this gray-green paint on the top side so that when somebody was above you looking down, they couldn't see you. Well, in the wintertime, when there was snow over there, it was kind of better to have the natural metal-colored airplane. We'd actually had a program there to paint them and repaint them. And I remember in the fall, I came back from a mission one time, and the first snow had hit the ground over there. I made a very casual statement of, hey, the first snow hit over there. I said, you know, pretty soon we're going to have to, you know, repaint this mother. I happened to put myself on the mission board for the next day and went home, never thought anything about it. And we had a mission coming up the next day, sure enough, and I go down there and come out to my airplane, and the thing is silver. And these guys had bloody hands. It washed it down with gasoline.
The 357th was, by 1944, a crack outfit, the top-notch assemblage of seasoned fighters. They had been tested. They had proved themselves. But there was another test to come, another mission beyond anything they had accomplished. Berlin. A raid on that city would do more than impair the Germans' capacity to wage war. It would strike an incalculable blow to their morale. Berlin was the psychological heart of the Nazi Empire. If it was not safe, no place in Germany was safe. Goering himself would say later that, when I saw the Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost.
On this particular mission, we're making landfall across into Holland, over Holland. Colonel Graham, the group commander, suddenly calls me and says there's radio silence and all, but he got my attention. He said, you got it. There's no conversation. With that, he peeled off and went home. And so suddenly I was group leader.
General Hayes, the one thing I remembered about him was that he and another guy called Colonel Dragney was, whenever we went with those guys, we knew we were going to get into a good fight. They would never shirk duty, never turn away. You know, they would get you there and get you in combat.
Well, on this particular mission, we went in, and the weather was rather poor as far as finding navigational points on the ground to orient yourself with. We didn't know exactly where we were. Tommy Hayes was leading, and he did a fine job, and we had flown the required time and distance, and we hadn't found any bombers. We hadn't seen them. We actually hadn't found Berlin, and it was beginning to look kind of bleak. And this was the only time in 77 combat missions I ever flew over there that I was ever consulted about the operation. Bless Tommy's heart, he called out and said, Obie, where do you think we are? I said, I think we've gone past it.
On O'Brien's suggestion, the 357th turned around.
And we had no more than made that turn, and we hadn't been on course probably 2 or 3 minutes, so it meant we were probably still over German soil. And to our left, over here, came the 8th Air Force, a beautiful, one of the most gorgeous sights you'll ever see in your life, strung out for mile after mile after mile of silver aircraft at 20,000 feet, beautiful formation, but still down the road down there, about 20, 25 miles from us. You go to your right over here, and here's the German Air Force. Boom! Here's 110s starting to come in with 109 top cover. They're carrying rockets. So we immediately attacked the German aircraft.
God, the flak is a solid black. You couldn't see the bomber. It was so solid.
I picked up a 110 at about 20,000 feet and worked it over the left side. And I was following this 110 down. He was diving, I was diving. He was pulling G, I was pulling G, and set the right engine on fire. And he was still going down this dive and everything, but my guns were dropping out. Where I'd started out with 4 guns, the last I remember, I was down to about 1 gun. And I pulled up and rolled over and watched him, and he went into what I thought was a factory, and he set it on fire. There's a good-sized explosion. Whatever was in that building, we tore it up pretty good. That was it. We started back up. I pulled my trigger on the guns, no guns. And now here we are at Berlin, Germany, and we haven't got gun 1 is working, and I'm by myself.
It was the most massive air armada the world had ever seen. Thousands of bombers and fighter planes in a ceaseless stream that took 30 minutes to pass overhead.
These 109s had made this head-on attack and shot down 2 V-17s right in front of our eyes, and were forming up to make another head-on attack. Well, by this time we had dropped our drop tanks, and we'd got our airplanes up to speed, and we engaged them and broke up the attack.
And so I climbed up and set course for England by myself. And another 51 come and tacked on to me, and just as a matter of interest, this guy called over and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Leroy Brown." He said, "I'm Leroy Reuter." I said, "Stick with us," and we were trying to get out of there. I think Leroy saw a 110 and called it, another 110. And I told him, I said, "Leroy, you take him." I said, "I haven't got any guns." And so we turned over towards the 110, and I told Leroy, "I'll cover you the best I can." The only thing I could do was turn into him if we were jumped and try to scare him. And fortunately, nobody bounced us, and I got to sit up there with a ringside seat and watch Leroy shoot up another 110. And it was a wonderful mission in this respect that we put 46 aircraft into the air. We had 33 of them stand target area support. The rest of them had aborted. We shot down 20 German aircraft that day and just damaged and probably destroyed some others. I think we had no combat losses due to enemy action.
The 357th cannot be summed up in numbers, although the numbers are impressive. Over 600 victories, the most for numbers of hours in the air. The victories, perhaps, were made less sweet by the memories of friends who were not there to share the triumphs. Those who survived wove a bond around each other's lives, a common thread of camaraderie, respect, and friendship. It was a time when the world promised great drama and asked the price of great danger. It was a life where the narrow cockpit of a plane was 1 minute a private doorway to the entire sky, and the next a brittle casket falling down to a field named in a foreign language. It was a life spent dueling in the sky and a life lived in the shadow of loss and sorrow. But there were, as one of the pilots said, no goodbyes and there were no regrets. The fighter aces of World War II have flown into history now. Their like will never be seen again because the nature of war has changed forever.
A fighter pilot, I think you got to be a rebel and a daredevil. I mean, it sounds corny, but a guy who's willing to take a risk. They're risk takers. And if the rewards are worth the risk, there's a thrill about it.